Welcome to the fourth annual presentation of Journey Writers Tell the Whole Story, Queer Black History. My name is Carla Dean. I'm the president of Journey Writers Incorporated. Our mission is to provide a safe, open, and supportive environment for writers to share their work and receive constructive feedback and encouragement. Each year, we present a program featuring famous and sometimes not so famous individuals from Black history. In many instances, these are individuals who may not have been fully recognized for their entire selves. We believe that it is important to know and understand the entire person when we consider these icons of history. And so, Queer Black History endeavors to tell the whole story. This year, we are pleased to present three women, Pauli Murray, Audre Lorde, and Josephine Baker. This is also the first time that we have presented Queer Black History as a virtual program. As a result, following the presentation, if you are signed in on your Google account, you will have an opportunity to participate in a talkback session with the authors and presenters by typing your comments and questions into the chat. If you are not signed in, we invite you to remain with us to view the discussion. To find out more about Journey Writers and to see samples of our writing, we invite you to visit our website, journeywriters.org. And we invite you to join us for a workshop. You will find a complete calendar of workshop dates and times on the website. And now, we hope you enjoy the program as Journey Writers tell the whole story, Queer Black History.
Hi, I'm Beth Gibbs. And after years of working for media, higher education, and nonprofit organizations, I'm free-tired and using my time and energy to teach and write. I've published 2 books, a children's book, Ogie Bogie, the Elephant Yogi, and a self-help book for adults, Enlighten Up, Finding Clarity, Contentment, and Resilience in a Complicated World. And I blog at bethgibbs.com. And for this Journey Writers program, I've written 2 of the pieces you will experience. I wrote and will perform Pauli Murray, They Called Me a Firebrand. And I wrote it last year after my book group read Firebrand and the First Lady, about Pauli's friendship with Eleanor Roosevelt. And this year I picked Audre Lorde because I wanted to explore the life of this creative woman.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Davis, and I'm portraying Audre Lorde in this evening's dramatic reading for the Journey Writers Queer Black History program. I received my BA in theater from Trinity College. I've been an active member in the Journey Writers Incorporated since 2013, writing and acting in original works. A few of my favorite roles performed in community theater are Mary Prentice and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, My Dear in Jar the Floor, and as an elderly slave in Ordinary People, Civil War monologues. When I was asked to portray Audre Lorde, I had no idea who she was. I read a few articles about her online, and I viewed a few of her interviews on YouTube. I realized after these things that indeed I do know Audre Lorde, because she lives inside of every Black woman through shared experiences. Her fight is now our fight. And I must say, I'm very humbled to step into the spirit of such a dynamic person. Thank you, Journey Writers, for trusting me with this reading.
Hi, I'm Leslie Bivens, and I'm a journey writer, and this is my third year performing in the Queer Black History program. And this year I have written and performed a piece on Josephine Baker. I have been writing, performing in all mediums since I was about 3 years old. And I have selected this piece because Josephine Baker is someone that is very near and dear to me, because I think that her life story teaches us lessons about the power of secrets and how we handle them in our everyday lives and how we choose to incorporate them, be it positively or negatively. And I think that she was a woman, first and foremost, that a lot of people mistook for just her stage persona, and they forgot about the woman behind the glitz and the glamour, and yes, the famous and the skirt came off. She was a mother, she was a woman, and she just wanted to be loved and she wanted to be liked. And she just wanted to leave a message behind that she lived with secrets and she lived through a time that was rife with racism. And she just wanted to be accepted and she wanted to belong and she wanted to be loved. And really, who doesn't? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Pauli Murray, and I have been called a firebrand. And as a matter of fact, it was First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt who called me that. And she had good reason. You see, I was an architect of two important social justice movements, the civil rights movement and the women's movement. I did my part, and I'm proud of it. And like a cat, I had many lives. I was a lawyer with 4 degrees and a professor of American Studies at Brandeis. I've lectured about social justice. I wrote books, and I even became an Episcopal priest. Now, I may have been called firebrand, but many who wrote about me condensed my whole life into this short phrase. She was fated to be both ahead of her time and behind the scenes. And do you want to know how that played out over my life as an activist and as a person born in a female body, but who felt more like a man? And that's what I'm here to share with you tonight. My firebrand nature came into the world with me on November 20th, 1910. That's the day I was born. My parents named me Anna Pauline. And I grew up a thin, wiry, ravenous child. I taught myself to read by the age of 5. And from then on, I devoured books and food indiscriminately. Biscuits, molasses, macaroni and cheese, pancakes, and beefsteaks, right along with the Bobbsey twins, the collected works of Paul Laurence Dunbar, and Booker T. Washington's autobiography, Up from Slavery. My Aunt Pauline raised me after my mother died. She called me her little boy girl. I did not disagree. I liked boys' clothes and boys' chores. And when I turned 15, I called myself Paul. Yes, I did. But at school, my firebrand ways drove my teachers to distraction, but they were impressed with my aptitude and ambition. And by the time I graduated at 15, that's right, 15, I was the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, president of the literary society, class secretary, a member of the debate club, the top student, and a forward on the basketball team. But when I got to Hunter College, I left my boy name home and called myself Polly. I mean, I felt like a boy, but I looked like a girl. So it made things easier at the time, if you know what I mean. And then my firebrand nature followed me to Howard University Law School. It was 1944. And in class, the students were discussing how to bring an end to Jim Crow. And in the half century since Plessy versus Ferguson, lawyers had been chipping away at segregation by questioning the equal part of the separate but equal doctrine. Chipping away too slowly by my way of thinking. So I proposed a radical alternative. Why not challenge the separate part instead? Well, they laughed out loud. They said my idea was impractical and reckless. I told them that they were flat out wrong. And right then and there, I made a $10 bet with Professor Spotswood Robinson that Plessy would be overturned within 25 years. Turned out, I was right. Plessy was overturned in a decade. Here's what happened. In my final law school paper, I formalized challenging the separate part instead of the equal part. I argued that segregation violated the 13th and 14th Amendments of the United States Constitution. And later, when Professor Robinson joined with Thurgood Marshall to try again to end Jim Crow, he remembered my paper, fished it out of his files, and presented it to the legal team. And in 1954, they successfully argued Brown versus Board of Education. I was ahead of my time and far behind the scenes on that one. And it was also at Howard that my race ceased to be an issue, but my gender, or the one I presented publicly, became one. Everyone else was male, the entire faculty, all my classmates. And on the first day, one of my professors announced to the class that he didn't even know why a woman would want to go to law school. Well, that made me double down on my firebrand nature. And you want to know what I called this type of humiliation? I called it Jane Crow. And I decided to prove him wrong by being first in the class. And I did. But my life as a lawyer, even with 4 degrees, was challenging. At the time, there were only around about 100 African-American women practicing law in the entire United States, and very few firms were inclined to hire us. So for several years, I scraped by on low-paying jobs. But then, in 1948, the Women's Division of the Methodist Church paid me to write an explanation of segregation laws in America. They wanted to know which states practiced segregation by law and which ones by custom. What they had in mind was a pamphlet. What I gave them was a 746-page book titled States Laws on Race and Color. It exposed the extent and the insanity of American segregation. The ACLU distributed copies to law libraries, Black colleges, and human rights organizations. Thurgood Marshall kept stacks of it around the NAACP. He called it the Bible of Brown versus Board of Education. But I was gratified when the book ultimately rendered itself obsolete. Once more, little old firebrand me was ahead of the times and still working hard behind the scenes. So next, I turned my attention to the women's movement, which was just beginning. And for the next 10 years, I spent a lot of time trying to advance it in every way I could. I argued sex discrimination cases and served on President Kennedy's Presidential Commission on the Status of Women. Then, in 1965, I was so frustrated with how little progress was being made, I proposed that women organize a march on Washington. That brought some raised eyebrows in the press, but the idea earned me a phone call from Betty Friedan, the most famous feminist in the country. I told her that the time had come to organize an NAACP for women. And in the June of '66, during a conference on women's rights in Washington, D.C., about a dozen of us got together in Betty's hotel room and launched the National Organization for Women. And then later, I co-wrote a law review article that was picked up by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you know her today by her rap name, Notorious R.B.G. And until her passing in 2020, she was a sitting justice on the United States Supreme Court. But back then, she was a rising star at the ACLU, and she used that article in 1971 to convince the Supreme Court that the Equal Protection Clause applied to women. Again, being a firebrand put me ahead of my time, but still behind the scenes. Next came a major disappointment that angered me and saddened me, because in spite of my approach to both civil rights and women's rights, I found myself not only behind the scenes, but also on the outside looking in. The civil rights movement was sidelining women, and the women's movement was sidelining minorities and poor people. And the gay rights movement, we were simmering, but it hadn't yet burst into our national consciousness like it is today. I was left with millions of people like me, constantly segregated into boxes labeled race, sex, and gender. I could find no real home in the social justice movement. And this impacted my personal life in a big way. So, you see, I'd always thought of myself as one of nature's experiments, a girl who should have been a boy. Now, that description helped me make sense of my desires. And I regarded my very natural falling in love with the female sex as a manifestation of my inner maleness. And sometimes I saw myself as a mixture of genders. Maybe two got fused into one with parts of each sex. And I thought at one point, male head and brain, female-ish body, mixed emotional characteristics. Maybe it was the times, my reticence to speak or write in detail about my gender identity, or the fact that I couldn't find words that truly described me to myself. Now, today, you have a spectrum of words that people like me can explore to find one that fits. And perhaps if I were alive now, I might have found one. And finding the right words would have moved me past my hesitancy to speak and write more about this part of my life and live it more openly as well, because this part of my life was somewhat complicated. I had one short marriage to a man, big mistake, one brief relationship with a woman in 1934, and then a relationship with Irene Barlow. And that lasted nearly a quarter of a century. My biographer described Irene as my life partner, although we never lived in the same house, only occasionally in the same city, and we left behind no correspondence because I destroyed all of Irene's letters to me. And I didn't talk much about our relationship in my memoir. But in 1973, when she was dying of a brain tumor, I did refer to her as my closest friend. I had issues, major issues surrounding my gender and my sexuality. And every year from the time I was 19, I suffered breakdowns, and almost all of them triggered either by feeling as if I were a man or by having feelings for a woman. I was pretty miserable. So, regarding my gender and sexuality, it's pretty clear here that I was behind the times, not ahead of them, and did not have any idea of the scenes that would play out in the gay rights movement that was beginning to blossom during my later years. But in spite of my personal struggles, I persevered. My next move was to become the first African American woman vested as an Episcopal priest. Now, maybe I took that path because of my frustration with the civil rights and the women's movement. Maybe it was Irene's death, my advancing age, my firebrand spirit, or it might have been an internal spiritual push that had been simmering for years. Whatever it was, it came as a shock to everyone when, after accepting the most stable and lucrative job of my life, a tenured professorship at Brandeis in the American Studies Department that I helped pioneer, I resigned my post and entered New York's General Theological Seminary to become an Episcopal priest. In my classic firebrand fashion, the position was officially unavailable to me because the Episcopal Church did not ordain women. For once, though, my timing was perfect. While in divinity school, the church voted to change that policy effective January 1st, 1977, 3 weeks after I completed my coursework. And on January 8th, I became the first African American woman to be vested as an Episcopal priest. And a month later, I administered my first Eucharist at the Chapel of the Cross, the little church in North Carolina, where more than a century earlier, a priest had baptized my grandmother Cornelia, then still a baby and still enslaved. This was the last of my firebrand firsts. And although I truly felt that I didn't accomplish all I might have in a more egalitarian society, others thought differently. You see, I was sainted by the Episcopal Church, had a residential college named after me at Yale, where I was the first African American to earn a doctorate of jurisprudence. And my childhood home was designated a National Historic Landmark by the Department of the Interior. Then in 1995, when I died of pancreatic cancer, I was 74. By then, I had nearly completed my autobiography, and others have rightly noted my omission of most of my life's gender and sexuality issues. And I hope you understand that the omission is not surprising given the times I grew up in. But I lived long enough to know about the Stonewall riots and the election and assassination of Harvey Milk, but not long enough to see a Black president embrace gay rights, or the Supreme Court to rule that lesbian and gay couples can marry. Not long enough to witness my home state of North Carolina play a starring role in the rise of the transgender movement. And not long enough to see Latina Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor administer the oath of office to Kamala Devi Harris, the first woman and the first person of African and Asian heritage to hold the office of Vice President of the United States. I spent a lifetime insisting that my identity, like my country, must be fully integrated. And if I were living today, I think that my firebrand style would at long last be described as being right on time, out loud, proud, and in the front lines of my chosen social justice movements. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Audre Lorde. I am, or was, a writer and activist. I say was because I died of cancer in 1992. I survived my first bout, but not the second. It metastasized from my breast to my liver. The diagnosis was devastating. And at first I refused to believe that this was happening to me. But it forced me to think about my mortality, about how I lived my life and what I wanted for the rest of it, however short that might be. I started writing because I had a particular need inside of me to create something that was not there. I was editor of my high school magazine, and I wrote a poem about love. The student advisors told me that the sonnet was not good, but I really knew that it was. And I knew that she said that because she didn't like some of the things that I said in it. So I sent it off to 17 magazine, and they bought it. I made more money from that one poem than I made over the next 10 years of my life. They tell me my writing is still relevant in today's world. That may be, but long-term relevancy had no bearing on what or why I wrote. I wrote because I had to. I wanted to be heard while I still walked among you. More important than that, I wanted to be heard without being interrupted. I wrote about what I saw, heard, and experienced as a Black, feminist, lesbian, mother, and writer. I wrote, I spoke, and I received awards. But what I want to share with you tonight is my heart, the reservoir of my experiences expressed in my writing. You see, I knew that what is most important and heartfelt must be written down, spoken, made verbal, and shared in spite of the fear of being misunderstood or of making others angry at my anger. And I am angry. I know that anger lives inside of me as much as I know the beat of my heart. But anger is the appropriate reaction to racism, sexism, and homophobia. And anger is also the appropriate response when actions that arise from those attitudes do not change. For most of my life, I lived with anger. I ignored it, I fed on it, And then I learned how to use it in what and how I wrote, spoke, and acted. But what I realized was underneath all my anger at all the isms in the world lived fear. Fear is a writer's constant companion. Writing and speaking your truth is always fraught with danger because it is an act of self-revelation that is laced with vulnerability that can result in contempt, censure, and judgment. I shared these feelings with my daughter, who told me, if you don't speak it out, one day it's just gonna jump up and punch you in the mouth from the inside. Out of the mouths of babes. So because of my anger and in spite of my fear, I wrote and I spoke. As Audre Lorde, Black feminist, lesbian, mother, and writer, I am the embodiment of intersectionality. I, Audre Lorde, am a complete package, and I refused to be split into some politically correct answer depending upon who asked. It distressed me immensely when individuals and some groups asked me time and again if I felt more discriminated against as a woman, a person of color, or as a lesbian. I need to hold on to all parts of me in spite of the pressure to express one to the exclusion of all others. So I would tell them, I'm not Black on Mondays and Tuesdays, a woman on Wednesdays and Thursdays, or a lesbian on Fridays and Saturdays. And as for Sunday, I let that day be. All of us deserve a bit of peace at least one day a week. Now, because I do not want to engage in a theoretical discussion, I am going to give you a few examples of the kinds of experiences that fed my anger. In the interest of time, I will cut them short, but I want you to know that there were many more. Want to know what it means to be a Black feminist dealing with racism? Here's one example. In 1967, I was wheeling my 2-year-old daughter in a shopping cart in a supermarket in Eastchester. And a little white girl passing by in her mother's cart excitedly called out, "Look, Mommy, a baby maid." The mother shushed her daughter, but did not correct her. So 15 years later, at a conference on racism, I told that story. And I got laughter as a response. Laughter. How unutterably sad. Sad because most white women ignore their built-in privilege of whiteness. And they define women based on their own experience. And they leave women of color to be othered. Here's another. I was moderating a forum for Black and white women at a Southern University's conference, Women Study program. During the discussion, I asked the question, what has this week given to you? And one white woman answered, I've gotten a lot this week. I feel that Black women really understand me better now. They have a better idea of where I'm coming from, as if understanding her lay at the core of the racist problem. And then there is being a Black woman dealing with sexism. Strong Black women seeking authenticity and power are often seen as a threat by Black men who buy into the patriarchal ethos. It's just that Black women are oppressed in this society in many ways that are different than Black men. No man has ever been forced to bear a child that he did not want or to undergo enforced sterilization. It's a different, but no less difficult form of oppression that all Black people face. This morphs into the intersectionality of being Black, female, and a lesbian. All too often, the message comes loud and clear to Black women from Black men. I am the only prize worth having, and there are not too many of me. And remember, I can always go elsewhere. So if you want me, then you better stay in your place, and that is away from other women. Or I will call you lesbian and wipe you out. Straight Black women also threaten lesbians. Oh, it's real. At a Black literary conference that I attended, a heterosexual Black female told the group that to endorse lesbianism is to endorse the death of our race. How is defining myself preventing you from your self-definition? This attitude prevents us as a people from moving towards a common goal that will elevate us all. We all have the right and responsibility to recognize each other without fear and to love where we choose. Our differences must not define us or blind us. And then there are the children. Life with my lover, Francis, and my two children, Beth and Jonathan, was both joyful and a bit scary because Black children in America must be raised to survive. That means they must be warriors, raised to recognize the many faces of the enemy. Now, children of lesbians, I believe, have an advantage because they learn early that oppression comes in many forms, none of which has anything to do with their own worth and their absolute right to digest their life experiences, good or ill, into something that is useful, lasting, and effective for their lives. Within the war we all wage with the forces of death, I, like all of you, am not only a casualty, I am also a warrior. As I faced my death, I recognized that speaking my truth was not an indulgence. It was self-preservation and an act of political warfare. Actually, it's a way of taking your power back from all kinds and forms of racism, sexism, and homophobia. it was during a difficult time that I began to recognize and accept that within me was a source of power, acknowledging that while it was most desirable not to be afraid, learning that to put fear into perspective and face it had given me great strength. My life was one of work, love, rest, learning, and speaking out. I was able to pursue my truth and share it with deep and effective clarity. In the end, what we do with our words, our actions, and our lives is of utmost importance. Remember that. I'll leave you with a few lines that are as true today as they were when I wrote them in 1986. We have chosen each other, and the edges of each other's battles. The war is the same. If we lose, someday women's blood will congeal upon a dead planet. And if we win, there's no telling, for we seek beyond history for a new and more possible meeting. Thank you.
Everybody's got secrets. My life didn't start no different than anybody else's in that way. I just learned early how to keep them and when to use them. I'm a walking secret. I was born into this life with secrets. My own mama didn't even much want me. She couldn't even decide who she was gonna claim as my own daddy. Well, she stayed in the hospital 4 days, all expenses paid, after she, to her eternal regret, pushed me out. 4 days. That was unheard of for a colored woman and a colored man. So that led to the rumor of my daddy being a white man, but I never saw him. I was always led to believe he was just a vaudeville showman I never saw much of. We was poor, not poor, not dirt poor, but poor. Drop your little yellow behind out of school and clean up after nasty white folks poor. Too poor, too dark, too light, wanted, unwanted. I learned early that shucking and jiving was gonna get me the hell out of St. Louis and washing dirty, nasty white folks' drawers. I knew there was a secret hidden somewhere in little yellow Frida Josephine. I made some hard choices along the way, but I worked hard, lived hard, and loved hard sometimes too. A lot of the times, the lessons I learned about secrets and the power of sexuality kept me fed. No thanks to Carrie McDonald, mama, and her standing by while a 50-year-old man played house with little 13-year-old me. Shoot, by the time I was 15, I was on my second marriage and thoroughly done with Frida. From then on, I was Josephine Baker. And I knew the secret then was I was never going back. Shortly and thoroughly done with that man also, I was singing and dancing my way across the country, working the chitlin circuit. But listen, it was hard and it was cold, and I'll admit I wasn't living my best life. But look here, I finally made it to Broadway. 1923, the promised land. And I had been funny my whole life. And now it was finally paying off. I couldn't believe I landed a role in Shuffle Along as a janitor. I guess it was wrong to say it was my big break. Eventually, though, I finally landed a role as a chorus girl. But besides that, by then I decided I hated this damn country. Look here, I knew I wasn't beautiful, but I had something else. I had a set of legs that could move like they was on fire. And I was light-skinned-ish. And I was funny. And I had magic. Don't y'all tell me nothing about Black girl magic. You don't know nothing about it. Black girl magic is making folks see you when you've been born invisible. And let me skip ahead here a second. Hemingway said, Josephine is the most sensational woman anyone ever saw. Now, ain't that magic? Well, I knew I was on the next thing smoking. I was one of the first colored Americans to move to Paris. Paris. I was 19 and they were not ready. The Black Pearl, the world, she was changing, no? And I along with it. But America, she was not. People like me still live like little more than slaves. But I knew I could use my talent for the world. I worked for many causes. I did good deeds. Oh, I had fun though. I did. And there were gifts. Men gave me many gifts. Men drank champagne from my shoes. Women too. Perhaps you've heard of the Frida Kahlo rumors, which I will neither confirm nor deny. If you didn't see it, then it's not your business, is it? So what if I loved hard? What should it matter what love looked like? It didn't matter to me as long as it looked like love. And when it stopped looking like it, I stopped looking at it, period. Cher, I worked. I was a spy for the French Revolution. It's all true. I did smuggle secrets in my lingerie. Who are they to check the jazz, Cleopatra? Besides, after all, by then I was a full French citizen with very influential friends. Princess Grace of Monaco being one of my very best. And when I fell on hard times, she was there and took on all 12 of my adopted children. Princess or no, that is the measure of a sister. I always kept my ears open to the situation here. Being an activist was always important. My rainbow tribe of children needed to be safe anywhere in this world. I didn't care what skin they wore or who they loved. You'll never really make it in this world if you make it alone. But from the stage, I had my way of sharing the pain of racism. I thank dear Monsieur Langston for calling me his muse. Silly, silly man. Merci, merci, Langston. But I refused to perform in the US for many, many years, even after I was welcomed with generous compensations for segregated audience. I never gave up my role. I guess a piece of me will always be that young girl eating out of garbage cans, whether my cheetah has a diamond collar or not. I guess those lessons of youth never really leave us, do they, Cher? Coretta Scott King and I were great friends, and she understood that. I only turned down the leadership of the movement because I would not leave my children. I have 12, all races, by the way. I needed to prove we can all love. I don't care who has problems with it. I felt accepted in Paris, much freer. But of course there is racism everywhere. There is hatred everywhere, but nowhere near as deadly, as suffocating as it is stateside. I didn't fear the very death of my soul every damn day. And why should I give pieces of my art away that my ancestors gave me to people who wouldn't even let people who look like me sit and watch it? It's the reason why so many pieces of my art have tribal aspects in them. I had to let the world see and remember. Was I angry? Very. But I was proud also. And I was sexually free and young and exotic and on fire and so young, so very young. And I was the bronze Venus. Yes, I see from your faces. It's killing you, you devil. Come closer. Ask it. Ask me. I did it. I did it all. Yes. October 1925, Champs-Élysées, a smoky theater. I am a sinuous young goddess. Living music sensuality slips sliding over the melody. Is she real? The crowd whispers. It's the dance sauvage, the banana dance. It's the magic hour. This is love. This is all we have. This is all we are. This is my soul. You cannot take it. You cannot have it. I may love you, but you may not own me. We are all animals here. You have all come home to my tribe. How does she do it? How does she do it? How does she do it? Is she real? It is shocking how she moves it all as an instrument. It was said that the European dancers can only use the front, but the Black Pearl, she is the whole instrument.
Welcome to the Talkback. Welcome to the Talkback session for Journey Writers Tells the Whole Story. If you are logged in on your Google account, you can submit your comments and questions in the chat. If you are not logged in, we invite you to remain with us to watch the discussion. Let's start with Beth. Beth, can you unmute yourself?
Done.
Pauli Murray was influential in the civil rights movement and in the women's movement. Why do you think she's not gotten more recognition?
That's a good question. Possibly because she initially stayed in the background to do a lot of the legal work, a lot of the thinking, a lot of the organization. And I think some of the people who have been recognized are those that have been out in front. You know, those who've made speeches, those who've gotten arrested, those who are at the front lines of all the marches and so forth. And I don't think that was part of her nature, even though she might have felt that being behind the scenes, and she might have gotten tired of being behind the scenes. I think that was probably somewhat of a more introverted nature. Then introverts tend not to want to be out front. They kind of stay in the background, do the writing, the thinking, the legal work, and push other people out front. So that would be my opinion.
Great. Leslie, can you unmute? How many times actually did Josephine Baker get married? She married at a very young age and divorced. How many husbands did she have?
She had 4 husbands. 2 in her teens and 2 as an adult.
Wow.
Yeah.
She was married quite a few times.
Yeah. I
Andre,
don't know if you can count the ones at 13 and 15, though.
Yeah.
possibly not. Andre, if you could unmute yourself. We don't have Jackie
Yes.
with us this evening. However, in the Audre Lorde piece, she seemed to speak in a very deliberate way. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came about?
Well, when I was directing her in this particular program, and after viewing some of the audio and videos of Audre Lorde, I saw that she was very calm but deliberate and articulated quite well, almost in a professor-like way. So I wanted her to make sure that she appeared authoritarian, and when she got angry, that it wasn't a loud screeching anger, but it was a reserved, almost simmering, kind of quiet simmering.
So, Beth, Pauli Murray was reticent about her sexual identity. Can you tell us a little bit why you think that was?
I think there are a couple of reasons. I think one, the times, because most folks who wanted to have some sort of recognition and acceptability stayed in the closet. Two, I'm not and I don't know this. This is just my opinion from what I've read and what I sense. She says she felt like she was a man born in a female body, and that's one of the reasons she used to justify her attraction to other women. So there's a big question. Was she gay? Was she bi? Was she transgender? And I don't think she knew. So I think, and plus of the fact that it was an internal struggle with her, and because every year she would have some sort of a nervous breakdown, I think part of it, I don't think she really knew what or who she was inside. And I think part of it was also the times, and she wanted to be accepted professionally.
Mm-hmm. How did you go about writing that then? What approach did you take to writing about her?
Well, first I got some books and did some research, and I did some reading, and what they wrote about her was, some people who wrote about her said, well, she's transgendered, but there's no proof of that. Other people said she's gay and confused. There's no proof of that also. All we have are her words. And so if she says, in her words that she didn't talk about it because of the times, and she was reticent to talk about it. So there was an internal struggle going on with her that I don't think ever got resolved. And that's just my opinion, because she's not here to ask.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If you're on YouTube and are signed into your Google account, we encourage you to send us a question or a comment if you have those, and we would be happy to share them. Leslie, how did you approach writing about Josephine Baker?
I basically went back and forth through her timeline. I sort of zigzagged and I sort of filled in the blanks. And I just tried to really, really remain mindful that she wasn't always Josephine in her whole lifetime, that a lot of the time she was actually Frida acting as Josephine. A lot of times you see in her movement, she uses a lot of her shoulders, and that's a comforting gesture. And I just tried to be mindful of that and put myself in the mindset of somebody that was definitely afraid of going without.
Mm-hmm.
If there is, I'm sorry. I was going to ask, if there isn't a question in the chat, I wanted to ask a question to all the performers as well as the artistic director. Many Black women from the 60s and 70s to today will still state that the women's movement had nothing to do with Black women, et cetera, et cetera. Pauli Murray and Audre Lorde, as did many other Black feminists, identify strongly with the women's movement. as did I as a young woman. Wanted to ask what you think called Pauli Murray to be a leader in structuring the women's movement and made the identity so natural to Audre Lorde. Yeah, just interested in what you think.
Well, I think, Pauli was interested in civil rights and justice. And she was a lawyer. She had a spiritual bent, which eventually led to her absolutely becoming an Episcopal priest. And I think she was just offended by injustice and her own experience at Howard Law School when she confronted sexism in her class and a professor saying, "Don't understand why you're here because you're a woman." So she was pissed. And when she got pissed, she tended to do something about it. Just as she got pissed about what was happening with Plessy Verkus Ferguson. And so she was thinking very carefully about, well, how are the lawyers approaching this? They're missing a whole section of how to approach this. She had a very good mind. And so she saw the injustice there and she jumped in. Then I think she was offended by how she was treated as a woman, and she saw the burgeoning women's movement and she just decided to jump in. And then when she discovered that, yeah, the civil rights movement wasn't answering what was calling her for justice, and the women's movement, as much as she was interested and committed to that, wasn't answering her needs or what she saw. So she went to religion and spirituality. But yeah, I think she saw the relevance of both the civil rights movement and the women's movement to Black women, but they somehow movements always tend to focus on one thing, and they don't tend to be broad enough to encompass basic human justice. And I think that's what she was looking for, and she didn't find it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Beth, you also wrote the Audre Lorde piece that we heard. Can you expound a little bit more on how you thought she felt about her sexuality and why she was so more open with it?
I think she was an academic. So the reason that she was speaking so professorially was because she was a professor. And I think she looked at things very intellectually, in an intellectual manner. And I think she wanted to be who she was and express who she was in the way that she needed to express who she was. So I don't think she was afraid of saying, "You're not seeing me," to the civil rights movement. "You're not seeing me," to straight women. "You're not seeing me," to men. And so she just said, "This is me, and take it or leave it." I just said that line, and that line, I think, although I put it in the Audre Lorde piece, I think it actually came from Flo Kennedy, who was involved in the women's movement and was one of Gloria Steinem's right-hand persons. And I think that was a quote or a line from her where she said, "I'm not a woman on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday." So I love that line, and I've used it myself. So it just seemed appropriate.
Great. Leslie, Josephine Baker was extremely popular in Paris, but perhaps not quite as popular in the US. Do you think it had to do with her sexuality, or what was it that made the difference?
I think that it had to do basically with colorism of the times. Being a showgirl, she wasn't dark enough to be considered dark-skinned to be, the dark-skinned girl in the chorus. And she really wasn't light-skinned enough to be considered light enough for the North, which is the reason why she wasn't popular in the Harlem sect. So she, like in the pieces say, she was too light and too dark at the same time, but she was certainly light enough to be considered exotic in Europe at the time. So she was quite exotic there. and she worked it to her advantage. But for here, she was just regular. She was plain just an average girl.
Great. Andre, this year, Queer Black History is featuring 3 women. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to put this program together with all women instead of including as well?
Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Can you all hear me? Problem with my connection, so please forgive me if I fade out. So what happened was we were trying to have more than women, but it turned out that that's who submitted writings, and those individuals submitted writings on women. It was more of a issue with doing this presentation for the first time electronically than it was with doing anything with women. I had 2 writers and 3 actors, and it just wasn't any difference between a man and a woman doing the acting. So I can't speak to differences in approach or anything when it came to the technical aspects of putting this on because people were women or men. The issues came in with doing this electronically, and I think that we did a very good job acting in a little box.
Okay, great. I'm going to come to a close in just a minute, but I did want to ask one other question about Audre Lorde. She had a new literary genre that was created from her book Zami, A New Spelling of My Name. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm afraid that was one I did not read, so I cannot comment on it because I haven't read it.
Andre, can you comment on it?
I can't remember the term, but I can see the book in front of me. Zami, A New Spelling of My Name, an auto-fictional, an auto something. Sorry, it's in the subtitle in terms of what she names that genre.
Okay. Yeah, well, we'll have to do a little bit more research on that. Any other questions? Yes, Denise.
I have a question. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm sorry that Jackie isn't here because her performance, her portrayal of Audre Lorde fits into the question that I have. I've noticed not just through tonight's performances, which by the way, ladies, you did such a fantastic job, but also just throughout history and recognizing through what you've said tonight, both Beth and Leslie, that neither the women's movement or the civil rights movement actually fit the needs of Black women. And I wonder how much that had to do with the fact that many Black lesbian women had relationships with white lesbians as opposed to Black women. Was that because, do you think, because Black women were still in the closet, because Black women had already, one ism that they were dealing with and did not want to add another one to them, so they were reluctant to come out? What do you attribute that to?
That's interesting because I never gave that any thought. But it could be because of what you said, that perhaps so many Black women were still in the closet, but I just don't know. And maybe it was just that this is who they fell in love with.
As a Black lesbian who was, and politically active and was running back and forth between the civil rights movement and the women's movement, wearing myself out, absolutely. For me, it was that Black lesbians were like married to the closet. People have seen me in a number of relationships with white lesbians. What they haven't seen are the Black lesbians I've been with who absolutely won't be known, and I can't live in a closet. So that's another really hard thing. And I think a lot of us, especially those who are more academically and politically minded and more like public figures suffer through a lot of that. Not that there's like this thing of like, you know, we're going to exclude any race of women, but just a particular frustration with the women with whom we culturally identify, being like, yeah, come see me at night and don't tell nobody you know me.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question that came through on the chat. How did you go about choosing the people to portray?
Well, I think I mentioned this in the introduction, which they might not have seen. I chose Pauli Murray because I belong to a book club that's been meeting for 25 years, third Sunday every month. We call ourselves the Warrior Women of the Third Sunday. And for this particular month last year, one of the women said, I'd like to read this book, The Firebrand and the First Lady. And it was about Pauli Murray and her relationship, her friendship actually with Eleanor Roosevelt. And so we read the book and we discussed it. And then I think it was at a Journey Writers meeting when Andre announced that he was open for submissions for the Queer Black History program. And I thought, oh, well, she'd be perfect. And I just read about her. It'd be easy enough to write about. So she chose me, I think. And in terms of Audre Lorde, I just wanted to write about a creative woman, and I was going to do Angela Davis, but I heard that somebody else had taken Angela, so I chose Audre Lorde instead.
Great. And Leslie, do you want to tell us how you chose Josephine Baker?
Well, I chose Josephine Baker because I've always had a fascination with that particular era, just because of stylistically it appeals to me. And honestly, how could you not love Josephine Baker, really? And everything that she stood for and everything that she did, her life is just so fascinating to me that the opportunity arose and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to do. And nobody else claimed her in the room. So I just kept it to myself for a while. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I just went about it. And that was a wrap.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
May I interject my reason for the writings that I do?
Of course.
Well, one of the reasons why I picked the people that I picked, and Bayard Rustin was the first and last person that I picked. And Bobby Short would have been this year. I may do him the next time, is because of supply and demand, because of the mechanics and logistics of having to actually put it together. Because sometimes you want to do research on someone and all you have is rumor. You don't have the letters. You don't have the books and research that other people have done. So when you're trying to, first of all, read about the person, you don't have footage. If you have video, audio footage, you can listen to these people. But if you have hardly nothing at all, it makes your purview limited. You can't pick people that you might want to pick, because we and Journey Writers don't want to, decide that somebody's gay or somebody was gay and put that label on them unless we actually have evidence that they are those people. So we bring their whole selves as best we can based on the material that we can find. And that's what I do.
Great. Thank you, Andre. And I'd like to say thank you to all of our writers and performers, Beth Gibbs, Jackie Davis, and Leslie Bivens. I'd like to thank Andre, the Journey Writers Artistic Director, for directing this production. I'd like to thank our members and friends of Journey Writers, including those of you who are viewing us right now, for your support. And a very tremendous thank you to our technical team, Ann Theriault, and especially to Larry Remming, who is the treasurer of Journey Writers and a wonderful technical support to us. We invite you to check out the Journey Writers website at journeywriters.org for more information about Journey Writers and our workshops and our programs. Thank you for joining us for Journey Writers Tell the Whole Story, Queer Black History.